Hello and welcome to Miss Nadine's revision video on Marley's Ghost and the Supernatural in Stave 1 of A Christmas Carol. So the first thing that I would like you to do is to pause the video and do a 3-minute brain dump. So thinking about what supernatural signs are there, what's Marley's role, any key quotes about him, important context, any methods, Dickens' message, anything like that. So 3 minutes, what do you already know? Okay, and then I'm going to go through some of the things that I would cover and what I'd expect to see in an answer. Now, obviously, for A Christmas Carol, you actually have an extract in front of you. So there's slightly more in this than my Blood Brothers videos because you need to be able to analyse the text rather than just know loads and loads of quotes. So we're going to start off by looking at the supernatural. And this section I think is a really key section. So this is when the knocker converts into Marley's face, and I've highlighted a couple of things that I just want to draw your attention to should this extract come up on the exam. So the first one is we get not a knocker but Marley's face. Marley's face. So we've got this gap there, changing from our paragraphs, but we've got that repetition to highlight to us that Marley's face is appearing in a knocker and that is a weird thing to have happened. So Dickens using the technique of repetition there to really highlight to his audience that this has happened, that actually the knocker has changed. And then we get the description of it. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look. Now, some of the other ghosts that we get are angry, are ferocious, kind of do show emotions. Here, it's not really a full ghost, it's just a supernatural occurrence. And it's I think what we're supposed to feel here is, even though it's not scary in terms of it being angry and ferocious, it's still a ghostly spectacle. It's still something that's scary for Scrooge to encounter. And we're told kind of explicitly it was not like this, but it was still scary. And then we get kind of it disappears. And then we get Scrooge's reactions. He did pause with a moment's hesitation before he shut the door, and he did cautiously look behind it first. Now that's not my italicising, that's Dickens. So he's again drawing our attention through repetition to what Scrooge did do here. He did pause just for a moment, and he did look cautiously behind it. So he's slightly unnerved, but then poo-poo. He's fine. He puts it out of his mind. And then we get Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He's not someone who's easily spooked. He's not someone who we can kind of consider an unreliable character here. This isn't something that he's someone who kind of is scared by every single noise. Scrooge is normally quite steady. And he's saying, yeah, I'm fine with this. Poo-poo. But then he thinks, and this is something that loads of people forget about kind of when we're revising Christmas Carol, he thinks he sees a locomotive hearse going before him in the gloom. He thinks he sees like a coach and horses going down his stairs. Now, and that's quite important in terms of your context. So at this time in kind of the English history, a lot of people believed that they had seen ghosts. Most people, in fact. Your lighting, it's mainly gas lamps, so we're kind of getting these strange flickers, and we've got the fact that the fumes of these would kind of affect people in kind of their senses and what they'd be able to see, and sometimes they'd even kind of be getting almost high off some of the flames and the fumes that came from some of these gas lamps. So seeing a ghost wasn't particularly unusual here. And this idea that Scrooge wasn't somebody who every time he saw him was like, oh my gosh, I've seen a ghost. He was not a man to be frightened. He's not normally bothered by them. Now, the locomotive hearse going before him in the gloom could be kind of explained by that way, but the knocker, we are definitely encouraged to think this is a real supernatural event. And so then we go on to kind of the little next section, which is Scrooge in his house. And then we get one of my favourite quotes. Darkness is cheap and Scrooge liked it. Not relevant particularly to the supernatural, but I just think it's a great quote. But we do get, but before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that he was all right. We get that discourse marker, but, telling us this is different. before he shut the heavy door, he walks through his room to see that everything was all right. And then we get this big long list of him searching his house and everywhere that he searches. And you can see I've highlighted that repetition of nobody. He is looking for somebody there. He's scared. He's unnerved. Even though he's gone, oh, poo-poo, I'm fine with this. He's actually unnerved, shown by this. And then he locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. It's not usual for Scrooge to be locking himself in, particularly double locking himself in. So he is scared by this supernatural. But we've got this difference between appearance and reality. Even though there's only him in there, he's still putting on this bravado that he's not scared, and that he's fine by it all. We then get a nice long description of Scrooge's house, and then it's talking about the tiles, and he feels like there'll be a copy of old Marley's head on every one. Everyone. He can't escape this. He kind of keeps on seeing these things that he can't quite understand, but then we get humbug. No, not engaging with it. And it shows how reluctant Scrooge is to kind of accept anything outside his little sphere of his counting house and his money and focusing just on that. He just dismisses everything. But then we get the bells. The bells start to move. And he has great astonishment and a strange, inexplicable dread. So his bells in his house start ringing all by himself. And he's astonished by that, which I think is a relatively normal reaction. But then we get a strange, inexplicable dread. Inexplicable means unexplainable. And he can't put his finger on why he is so scared by this, because it's so out of character for him. Like, if my bells all started ringing in my house, I wouldn't say it would be a strange dread, because I would be scared. And I think that would be kind of a normal reaction for a lot of people. But for Scrooge, this is unusual for him, and it highlights that something big is happening here. Something big is going to happen, and we don't know what it is, but the Scrooge is acting out of character, and this is not normal. Kind of everybody else in Victorian London might be seeing these ghosts and hearing these bells and things, and they're fine with it, but Scrooge isn't. He's trying to ignore it, but it's unsettling him. And then we get, this might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. We've got this idea of time being played with, which is something that Dickens does throughout this novella, in that we get told that the spirits are going to visit over a series of nights by Marley, and then Scrooge feels like he's been gone for ages, and actually it's been less than an hour. And Scrooge at the end says, "Oh, I can't believe the spirits did it all in one day, all in one night." And so we've got that kind of that introduction here of time being something that Dickens is going to manipulate. And so, to summarise, these are what I think are the key things to know about the supernatural. Dickens establishes Scrooge outward claims he doesn't believe it. Okay? Poo-poo. Humbug. He is not concerned by this. However, he double locks himself in. He searches the house. He uses a list repeating nobody to highlight the intensity with which Scrooge searches. Now, we have already had hints that Scrooge is different on the outside than the inside. I would refer back here to solitary as an oyster and sharp and hard as flint. Both of those are things that appear to be one thing, but actually have kind of got the potential for good inside him. Here, he is refusing to accept this idea of the supernatural existing, of there kind of being things outside of his neat little world, and he just doesn't accept that they happen. But we know, obviously, later on, he is going to. So, if I was you, I'd pause the video now and make sure you're really happy with the supernatural. Maybe copy a couple of things down off this slide. Because now we're going to be looking at Marley's ghost. So, we get a real build-up to Marley's ghost appearing. We hear this clanking noise deep down below. The ghost kind of starts off in the pits of his house, in the cellar. And we get Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. ghost stories are a really new phenomenon. Dickens can kind of create his ghost story however he wants. They're not like a set of rules that he needs to follow, but they're really, really popular. So what Dickens is doing here is he's kind of saying, there's a ghost, and it's going to be kind of a standard, typical ghost. And just in case my Victorian reader doesn't know what that is, this is what a standard ghost is like. Ghosts in haunted houses. And this idea of dragging the chains, which is something he's going to really elaborate on. And then we get the door flew open. It's on the floors below. Then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. Dickens is really, really building up his tension here with his... within that sentence, we have got this really slow progression of the ghost coming up. And we're building that. And Scrooge, it's humbug still, I won't believe it. He's still refusing to acknowledge that it happens. That there's this ghost, that something exists outside what he already knows. And then we get the same face, the very same, pointing out that this is Marley's face. It hasn't changed, and that it's the same as it was on the door knocker. We get the description of what he looks like, and then we get the description of this chain. Now, this chain is super, super important. It was long and wound about him like a tail. Now, I think that similarly like a tail is really, really important because it's showing it's become part of him. Yeah, if you have a tail, you can't just like clip it off and, I'm not wearing that one today. It's part of him, and he can't escape it. And so I think that's quite a nice little simile that Dickens uses there. And also it suggests kind of his animalistic, and it kind of is no longer human, kind of that supernatural vibe. And then what's this chain made of? Cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, heavy purses wrought in steel. They're all symbols of Marley's sins. His chain is made up of the sins that he committed whilst he was alive. And we'll see kind of when we go through that the other ghosts that we see, they also have chains that are made up of their own sins. So we have got this with all of his sins there for Scrooge to see, and they are all related to greed, which is one of our 7 deadly sins. This is a really clear picture of a ghost, but Scrooge fought against his senses. He is still ignoring it. It is not happening. It's fine. He can feel the chilling influence of its eyes. But no, he is ignoring Marley's ghost. No, fight against my senses. I'm going to try and ignore it. And then they have a little bit of a conversation. Marley says, why don't you believe in me? And then, because a little thing affects them. Why don't you trust your senses? A little thing affects them. And then Dickens has Scrooge list again. Dickens loves the list. And whatever your extract is, have a look for this list because there's quite likely to be one there. List all the things that this could be rather than a ghost. An undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. All of these are things that in Scrooge's opinion, it's more likely to be than a ghost. And then we get Scrooge's. Scrooge's. I think this is one of his best lines. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Absolutely refusing to acknowledge that he was there. Refusing to acknowledge that this is a real thing that's happening, and even throwing in a pun there with the grave and the gravy. Now, let me just move my head. We're told this is unusual. Scrooge doesn't normally crack jokes, which I think we've kind of established by his actions earlier on in this stave. But he's trying to keep down his terror. He's having to fight hard to ignore what's going on here. And terror, we've got there that really powerful abstract noun that Dickens is using. And they talk for a little bit more, and then we get told kind of why you here then. And he starts to believe in him a little bit more, and then we get Marley's ghost explaining why he's here. It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow man and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Doomed. That's powerful, isn't it? Condemned. These are things that are ongoing processes. And here, Dickens is highlighting that Marley's ghost is trapped in purgatory, that he can't kind of move on, that he is trapped trying to make up for his sins, but he can't. And he's trapped, and we get a lot of verbs now related to him being trapped. Fettered. We get there. He's absolutely he's stuck in this, and then we get all of these this description explaining that this didn't happen by accident, that it was an ongoing process, and it wasn't just one sin that Marley did. It was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. He forged it. Takes a lot of effort to forge something. And then we get it tells them that Scrooge has laboured on it. So they've been working hard. And what Dickens is trying to say here to his reader is, you don't need to worry. If you're just making the odd accidental mistake, that's fine. But if you are consciously making a decision to be a bad person, if you're consciously making a decision not to look after others, then that's going to have consequences. And we get, I made it link by link, yard by yard. It was an ongoing process. It kept on happening. I girded on it on my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Nobody forced me to do this. I made these bad decisions myself, and I need to start taking responsibility for it. And then he turns it on to Scrooge. Is its pattern strange to you? Directing it. This is what you... Do you know what this is about? Have you kind of asking Scrooge, have you connected the dots up yet? And then he says, you've laboured on it. And Dickens sort of Scrooge realises, oh no, this isn't good. And he asks Jacob Marley for comfort. He's changed now. He's gone from not believing him to actually, can you help me? Tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob. Speak comfort to me. Imperatives. He's that anxious. He's trying to boss a ghost around, trying to explain to him. And he says, I have none to give. I have no comfort. Other people, other ministers, other kinds of men. I'm not here to make you feel better about what you've done. That's what other people will do. I'm here to sort you out. And we've got that repetition of other there, highlighting that Marley is one type of ghost, but there are perhaps others out there. And then we get this, you can see I can very much highlighting that I like this extract. It's possible that this could come up on your exam, I think. And we get, captive, bound and double ironed. All three of those mean very, very similar. They mean he's trapped. So really highlighting the importance of that chain. We get, that exclamative that Dickens is using to show how outraged Marley is by it. Oh, yeah, you've got that exclamation mark. Then we've got three adjectives that all mean the same, all mean that he is trapped. And then we get not to know, not to know, not to know. Like, kind of, these are the mistakes that I made. And we mention Christian spirit here. This idea that what you are doing is not following kind of Christian beliefs. Actions speak louder than words. We should have been doing better actions. But you were always a good man of business, who now began to apply this to himself. This is when Scrooge is going, oh, actually, I don't do things that are good Christian spirit working through me. I don't behave appropriately. And then we get the ghost with business. You can see how many times business is repeated. He kind of understands that to get through to Scrooge, business is the word that he needs to use, because that's how Scrooge sees everything. He weighs everything by profit and loss. He looks at everything through this sphere of business language. Decrease the surplus population. He sees everything. He sees humankind as a business. And Marley is saying, no, that's not right. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence, all my business. We get that list of things that he should have been looking at instead. And he's clearly stressed here. He's crying, he's wringing his hands. This is Marley trying to get through to Scrooge, and I feel like he's starting to. Who now began. It's not a complete process, it hasn't finished, but it's beginning to get through to him. And then Scrooge is subjected to all of this business language, which is kind of Marley's strategy to try and talk to him. And then Marley says, I'm here to warn you. You have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. And that is again a warning to your audience as well, that actually when you're reading this, you can change. And Scrooge is like, yes, thank you for helping me, you were always a good friend to me. And then he says, oh, this is how I'm going to help you. And Scrooge is not on board with this. This is not how Scrooge wants to be helped. I think I'd rather not. We get that faltering, that false start, and then he says, you're going to be visited by these three ghosts. Cannot get it all over and done with. Does Scrooge actually want to put the effort into change here? No, he does not. He wants Jacob Marley just to fix it for him. And Jacob says, no, I can't fix this for you. You need to fix it for me, for yourself. It's too late for me. And that's again linking in with what kind of Dickens is saying to his audience, which is that just by reading this book, it's not gonna fix you. You're gonna have to put work in. You've got to start being a better person. And then Marley takes Scrooge to the window, and this is where we see all of the other ghosts. And I've highlighted in blue kind of how many ghosts there are there, and Dickens here is highlighting how many people have got this horrible fate waiting for them, how many people have got their sins waiting for them to trap them, because it's filled, every one of them. None of them were free. Many, all. We get a lot of vocabulary there in terms of numbers and how much, how many ghosts there are that are trapped in purgatory. And we get they might be guilty governments, this idea that Dickens just kind of drops in here, that potentially not everyone who works in government is great, they're not always making the right decisions, and that actually sometimes we have to act differently to them. And then we get Scrooge's reaction to this. So Marley's gone, the ghosts have gone, and he goes and he closes his window and he checks his door, and it's double locked, the same as it was before. He tries to say some humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. Scrooge tries to ignore what's just happened. He doesn't want to put the work in. He doesn't want to change. He wants just someone. Yeah, he was scared when it was happening. And oh, Marley, tell me what to do. Speak comfort to me. Tell me how I can change. And Marley goes, well, this is how you do it. Oh, that sounds like a bit of hard work. But he's trying to say, oh, well, that didn't really happen. But he stops at the first syllable. He has been affected by this, and it's right near the start of his journey to change. He's on this journey now, having seen the first ghost. So these are the things I think you need to know as key pieces of information. Obviously, all of the rest is really useful for if that extract comes up, but if it's a different extract and you just want some key bits about Marley, these are the things I think you need to know. So make sure you pause once I've gone through them and get them written down. But he is trapped in purgatory. His chain is made up of symbols of his sins, and it's, I think as well, that simile, it's wound round him like a tail. He can't escape it. It's part of who he is. It acts as a warning to Scrooge and the reader. Scrooge is initially very sceptical of Marley, and we get more of gravy than grave. We get that pun. Then he wants Marley to fix his problems for him, speak comfort to me, and that use of imperatives. He tries to rationalise, try and discuss with Marley, oh, maybe it's not that bad. You were a good man of business. Mankind was my business. We get that repetition of business all the way through, and we get the list of things that he should have been focusing on rather than money. But Scrooge still doesn't want to face up to what he's done. He has to change. And Marley shows him the sheer numbers of others who suffer the same fate as him. He kind of doesn't. Marley is trying to explain to Scrooge, you've got to put in work to change. You've got to do something different, or you're going to end up like me. And Scrooge is not really in a position to hear that yet. And that's probably how a lot of Dickens' original audience, his contemporary audience, would have felt, in kind of, oh yeah, being trapped in a chain sounds really horrible. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to act on it yet, which is why we then get these three other ghosts who highlight what you need to do and kind of why you need to do it, and all of that is designed to build on the groundwork of Marley. I hope that was helpful and that you feel a bit more confident on exploring the supernatural in general and Marley's ghost if either of those come up on your exam. Thank you.